This is Kay Rudolph. This is the second in a series of presentations that I'm doing based on John Coletta's article, Tracking a Loner on the Move, J.W. Parberry Exposed by the Genealogical Proof Standard. In the first section, we gathered some information about James Wood Parberry from court records, later census records, land records, and newspapers. We learned that he was a veterinarian. He was born about 1828 or 1829 in Virginia to parents born in Virginia. That would have come from the 1880 census. He was a witness of the fire that took place in Rolling Fork, Mississippi in 1873. He bought land a short distance away in Holmes County, Mississippi in 1876, but it was lost in later that year. And finally, he signed a half a dozen petitions supporting various liquor license applications in Grenville, Washington County, Mississippi, between 1890 and 1898. So we have a little bit of statistical data about him, and a picture of what type of a person we're looking for, occupation, characteristics. So I've mapped what we know so far because I want to understand the geography of the person that we're working with. He was born in Virginia, which at that time would have included West Virginia, around 1828-29, and we have him down in the Grenville, Rolling Fork area in the 1870s. So this is a great map that I used to look at on the old GeoCities website that no longer exists. So I retrieved it using the Wayback Machine on Internet Archive. I like this because it is a visual directory of just hundreds of migration trails that crisscross the United States. And so we can get a sense of how our James Wood Parberry might have gotten around. He started up here in Virginia and he ended down here in this area of Mississippi. And so one immediate route that catches my eye is the Fall Line Trail, a very popular way to migrate from the area here in Virginia, following if you look at the map, you can really see it, following the fall line of the Appalachians. But then again, there is that nice means of transportation following a river. So maybe he came from what is now the West Virginia area and took the river down. All right, let's get a research plan together, taking what we know and thinking about what we're going to do with that. Census records is going to be a first. We expect that he came of age around 1849, 1850, if he was indeed born in 1828, 1829. So we would expect to find him in the 1870, the 1860, and the 1850 censuses as a named individual. We would not expect to find him as a head of household in 1840. What about vital records? Well, we're going to need to do some research. When did Virginia begin registering births? What about marriage? Males typically married in their 20s in that time period. So we would expect Parberry's first marriage to occur, say, as early as, say, 1848, if he was born in 1828. maybe as late as 1860. Land records, we might find him purchasing land, getting a grant maybe, once he had attained his majority in 1849 or 1850, sometime after that perhaps. Probate, could he have been mentioned by a parent or by some other Parberry relative? We might want to take a look at the Virginia probate records. Tax records, he might possibly be listed as early as age 16, which would be around 1846. Some states did have poll tax on youths as early as age 16. Certainly at age 21, around 1849, he would have begun to appear on tax records. And military records, we would expect him to appear certainly in the Civil War. He would appear in any conflicts, or might appear in any conflicts, beginning as early as, say, 1844, when we think he might have turned 16. What campaigns might he have participated in? Google it. I go to Google for all of my questions. So I just Google the simple question, chronological list of U.S. wars, and there's actually a very nice article in Wikipedia that includes a timeline of the United States at war with all of the very minor events as well as the major wars that we're more familiar with. All right, we're going to start from what we know and we're going to move back in time. We're going to start with James Parberry as close to the information that we have. We have him from 1873 until he disappears from records in 1898, when we think he may have passed away. So let's start looking for him in the 1870 census. We expect that he is going to be in the vicinity of Mississippi. Let's see what we can find. I do a search for James first name. The last name, I'm going to use wildcards because it's been written so many different ways. And so I use the asterisk to take the place of anything from 0 to infinite number of characters. I put a check mark because I absolutely want to see only those records that have a last name that includes a P, B, and B that ends in RY. Likewise, I have a check for Virginia. I only want to see people who are born in Virginia, but I'm giving myself a very broad birth range because I'm still not entirely easy with the information that we have about his age. We get actually only one 1870 census result for a man named James Parberry, born in Virginia, 1825 to 26, living in Missouri. He's a farmer, actually quite well-to-do, which doesn't really fit with the characterization that we have from him so far. So, taking a look at the map, how does that fit in with the geography? This is way out of the way from those migration paths that we had anticipated. This really isn't looking like a good fit. So let's see if we can find that man from the 1870 census in 1880. So I do my search, repeat it again, looking at now the 1880 census here. We have a James M. Parberry with the spouse Susan. If you'll recall, his spouse was Susan in the 1870. This is the man who is not our James Parberry. And we take a closer look. We have James M., you can see how that might have been interpreted as an M or a W. He's working as a miner now. He has a wife, Susan, a daughter, Bessie, and a son, George. And when you compare that to the family that was living in Missouri in 1870, James, the age is fairly close. Susan, the age is fairly close. Bessie, you can see, was 15, now 24. I thought that was a George, but that's a James. James, 18, matching James, 8. And apparently Massey may have set up a household of his own or may have passed away. So we definitely said that this James Parberry that we found in the 1870 census is not our guy. All right? Can we find our guy in perhaps the 1866 Mississippi State Census? So that is available on Ancestry.com. I did a check to make sure that homes in Issaquah County are included in that census before I wasted my time doing any searches. And I did first a search for Parberry, looking at a very broad sounds like or spells like, and I got 0 good matches. So next I tried, what about James W. And I got a number of matches for James, but none of them turned out to be anybody who could be our James Parberry. All right, let's go to those military records. Let's just jump straight to that because the Civil War is such a source of great records. So we have a male born in around 1828-29. We would expect him to be 32 or 33 in 1861. Let's go to the wiki and look at their article on United States Civil War. They have a very good guide to beginning United States Civil War research that steps you through the process of locating the records for your ancestor. Step 1, identifying an ancestor who may have served. We've done that. Identify the county and state where your ancestor lived. Well, we know he was probably somewhere around Mississippi. That helps us to assume that he was probably fighting for the Confederacy. Well, we want to find our soldiers' regiment and company. The article gives us a link to a Civil War soldiers and sailors database that is maintained by the National Park Service. This is a great place to start a search for anybody who served in the Civil War. We're going to do a search for James W. Parberry. We're not going to select a state, but we are going to indicate that he served in the Confederacy. And we get one search result. A James W. Parberry serving in the 2nd Regiment of the Kentucky Cavalry. Well, let's take a closer look at this man. He served as a private in Company B. All right. Step 5, check the wiki article for the regiment. Step 6, search internet databases. It includes a link to an article on American Civil War records on FamilySearch.org. This is an extensive article with a lot of links to many different states. So I'm going to make my search easier by clicking Control F and doing a search for the term Kentucky in this article. And I can quickly then roll through and find an article that is specific to Kentucky service records of Confederate soldiers of the Civil War. That's exactly what I'm looking for. That includes a link to that collection as well as an article that provides more details. Doing a search for James Parberry returns 48 possible records, several for a James W. Parberry. And we get a link to images available on Fold 3. This is for that 2nd Cavalry of Kentucky. So let's take a look at those images on Fold 3. Now the nice thing is that those are now available for free on your home computer via the Santa Rosa County Library website or on the computer at your local Family History Center. If you don't live in Santa Rosa County and are not close to a Family History Center, check whether your local library provides subscription services to Fold 3. And here we have a set of compiled service cards for James W. Parberry, a private in Company B of the 2nd Regiment of the Kentucky Cavalry. They have his age listed as 39. We were kind of expecting him to be about 31, 32. But let's take a closer look. Look at every single record in the collection. As we leaf through, we find included not just cards, but also any paperwork that is unique to the individual. In this case, we have a pay stub for James W. Parberry that lists he was born in Virginia, born in Franklin County, Virginia. He's age possibly 39, possibly 37, maybe even 31. His occupation is a grocer. Our James became a veterinarian. Let's read some more. He enlisted in Glasgow, Kentucky. Taking a closer look at that age, we could read it as a lot of things. Further down, we see his payment for hire as, is that a farrier? Looking at the backside of that same document, pay as, definitely that word is farrier. What is a farrier? Well, let's Google it. The term farrier and Civil War, and take a look at these articles. A farrier is a person who worked with horses. Well, that would be the link to James later becoming a veterinarian. So, is this our Parberry? We have J.W. Parberry, also known as James Wood Parberry, that matches. Born in Virginia, that matches. Age 37 in 1863, that's close to our Parberry. And a farrier in the Civil War records, a veterinarian after war, that is a match. So we've got our man. Let's find him in the 1860 census. Again, I'm doing the search for James Parberry using the wild cards, saying I absolutely want to have that P, B ends in RY. Absolutely want someone who was born in Virginia and born in the 1820s. Now, before I start looking at records, I'm going to immediately go up and click on the link for collections. That keeps me from getting distracted, lets me stay focused on the task I have right now, which is to find James Parberry in the 1860 census. So we've got a couple of possibilities. We have one in Missouri, which I suspect is the man who later married Susan, and we have one in Hart County, Kentucky. Taking a closer look at him, James W. Parberry, age 31. He is a trader born in Virginia. Trader, that's another term for grocer. So this is definitely the man who was listed in the Civil War service record. Let's find him in 1850, and we have a James Parberry who is living in Barron County, Kentucky. Barron County is just south of Hart, where we have our man with his wife Nancy in 1860. In 1850, he is working as a laborer, living in the household of George H. Walton, a Methodist minister. Note that Barron County is the county seat of Glasgow. You'll remember Glasgow is where the Civil War soldier had enlisted in 1861. So let's assess what we now know. And I like to use a timeline for this to make sure that I understand all the details that I've collected about the individual. So we have from the 1850 census and the military pay record, those two agree for a birth of 1824 or 25 in Virginia, specifically in Franklin County, Virginia. The 1880 and 1860 censuses, though, suggest that he wasn't born until 1828 or 29. He was residing in Kentucky, in Barron County, in the 1850 census. His first child was age 5 in 1860, which suggests that they were married between 1850 and 1855. He had 3 children, John W., George G., and Tyler W., all born in Kentucky, aged 5, 3, and 4 months old, respectively. He enlisted in October of 1861 in Barron County in Glasgow, stating that he was born in Franklin. He was a grocer, and in 1863 he was captured in Ohio, transferred to Camp Lee in Richmond, where he was exchanged in February of 1865. And then we have the details about him that we found in the earlier video. Now, I wanted to note one other thing about this timeline. I did this in Word. I could also have done it in Excel. One problem that Excel has with organizing dates before 1900 makes it necessary to do something tricky. I enter my dates as a 4-digit year, period, 2-digit month, period, 2-digit date, and sort them as text. And that will provide me with a chronological listing. If I have a year with no month or date, I put a period after it. And I can use ranges as well. And so when I select the sort, whether I'm sorting in Excel or sorting it in Word, I'll sort it as text, and that will line these things up for me chronologically, including chronologically by month and date. So it looks like the assumptions that we made about how he migrated through the fall line road or down the river were probably not correct. It looks more like he took the wilderness trail from Franklin into central Kentucky. And I like to use the image overlays on Google Earth to get a good placement of all the events. And so we have him here in Franklin County, the Wilderness Road leading up into this area, other trails leading down into the Glasgow area or over into the Hart area. And here we see now his life in its entirety from what we've collected from Franklin immigrating to Glasgow, Kentucky, his service in the military, his discharge in Camp Lee. I really suspect then he probably did take that fall line road into the Rolling Fork area. When you look at the trail, you can see that that leads straight to Issaquena. So let's think now about what our goals are. We have James Wood Parberry in Barron County and Hart County, Kentucky. What records are we going to look for? Well, we're going to cover the basics. Are there any state censuses? We know we're not going to find him in the 1840 census. We've already found him in the 1850 and the 1860. Sometimes there are state censuses that were in intermediate years. We might want to take a look to see if there are any state censuses that he might appear in. What vital records, particularly marriage records, land records, probate, tax, local histories, and don't forget to talk to real human beings. Find out who the local historian is in your county or your town. Check with the reference librarian at your local public library. Check to see if there's a historical society or a genealogical society in your area who might be able to direct you to that person who knows everything about that location. Identify the unique collections that are available in that area. John identified Barron County apprenticeship records, divorce records, records of military maneuvers in Hart County, industry schedules of the 1850 census, internal revenue lists, and a variety of publications concerning Barron or Hart counties. So focusing first on that marriage record, looking at the 1860 census, James was single in 1850. In 1860, he had a 5-year-old son. That helps us narrow down when he's likely to have married. And the location of the births of the children in Kentucky indicates that the marriage likely happened in Kentucky. Take a look at the Family Search Wiki for Barron County, Kentucky genealogy. Marriage records began to be recorded in 1799. That's good to know. That gives us confidence that we're going to find a marriage if it did occur. In 1798, Barron County was created from Greene and Warren counties. Well, that's too early to be of concern to us, so we can keep our focus on Barron County and Hart County. For a list of record loss, see Kentucky counties with burned courthouses. That's a link to an article. Let's follow through on that. And we see no Barron County listed in the list of Kentucky counties with burned courthouses. That's excellent news. Hart County we checked. It says there was some records lost in a courthouse fire in 1928. That's not good to see. The article on Barron County continues to tell us that original marriage records are held at the office of Barron County, Kentucky genealogy clerk. Divorce records 1849 to 1958. And an article how to find Kentucky marriage records and an article about Kentucky divorce records. So let's take a look at this article on finding Kentucky marriage records. And first step, find marriage information in an index. There is a family search index of marriages, 1797 to 1954. It does note that it's incomplete for all counties and years. So the first thing I did, not even bothering to search for names, I checked to see, do they have any marriage records for Barron County, Kentucky, 1850 to 1860? They don't, so I'm not going to bother searching that anymore. Let's check for Hart. Likewise, nothing, so that collection will not be of any use to me. Moving on to the next collection. Family search marriages, 1785 to 1979. It does say it's incomplete for all counties and years. Let's do the same thing. Barron County, 1850 to 1860, we have 12,000 marriages. This is going to be worth spending some time searching. So let's do a search for a Parberry who was married in Barron County between 1850 and 1860. And we have several very good results. The Kentucky marriages 1785 to 1979 did not include an image, but it does include a film number. That's a suggestion that we can look at that film and look either alphabetically for Parberry or chronologically for 1 November 1851. We go to the catalog, we open the search option for film or microfiche number, enter that film number that we got from the index, and that takes us to the collection of marriage bonds. We open that link and scroll down, and we can see marriage bonds 1848 to 1855 in microfilm 209763. It was indexed and the images are available. So we click on the images and we scroll through to find out how this is organized. Now, our index said reference ID BK2P117. That says to me book 2, page 117. So this was book 1. We want book 2. So we're going to scroll through to the end of book 1 and the beginning of book 2, and we're going to look for page 117. And here we go. James W. Parberry and Joel Irwin, dated the 1st day of November 1851, solemnizing marriage between James W. Parberry and Nancy McMurray. We have J.W. Parberry's signature. We have Joel Irwin's mark. Now, there are a number of other options to look at that cover that period. The volume 11, 1849 to 1852, the marriage register, volumes 1 to 3, as well as that marriage bond that we looked at. Going through and looking at each one of these, we have here the license to marry, James W. Parberry, Nancy McMurray, said James W. Parberry, Nancy McMurray, and we have here, I celebrated the rights of matrimony between the above named parties, MPE George H. Walton. If we go back and look at that 1850 census, where James Parberry was living in the household of George H. Walton, a Methodist minister. So that links this census to that marriage record that we found for him marrying Nancy McMurray. Let's take a look and see what we can find as far as tax records. Looking at the wiki article on Kentucky taxation, reading through, we find a section on Kentucky Historical Society Index to Tax Lists, a family history library book arranged by county and includes the year of the tax list and the Kentucky Historical Society reel and page numbers. Now, that's not available through the link that we have here in this article. This takes us to the catalog. The catalog gives us a link to WorldCat, and we go to WorldCat to check to see whether there is a version of this available online somewhere or close by. And we do the search for Kentucky Historical Society Index to Tax Lists. We get about 22 results, and there are some possibilities that show up here. It turns out that one copy is available at the West Florida Public Library about 20 miles from where I am. Now, going to that record, John Coletta was able to pull out this information. James Parberry was taxed in Barron County in 1850. He appeared again in 1852. And the 1859, 1860, and 1861 records for Hart County also listed him. So the results from all those basics. The state censuses, none were taken. Vital records, we found one marriage record but no birth records. John found no land records and no probate records. He found the 5 entries that we just mentioned in the tax records. He did not find any local histories that included James Parberry. In the unique or unusual collections, he hit a brick wall. Nothing there. What we know, all right, we have a lot of information from his military history. When he enlisted, when he discharged, when he was captured. It's interesting that he enlisted in 61, he was discharged, but then several months later was captured, which suggests that he re-enlisted. He was on the POW rolls in Illinois, transferred to Maryland, hospitalized, and was in the POW rolls in Camp Lee. In 1850, we have James Parberry, a laborer, age 26, living with George Walton, a minister. The following year, he married Nancy McMurray, with his landlord officiating. 9 years later, he was enumerated. At this time, he was working as a trader, living with his wife Nancy, who was age 23. They had moved to Hart County with 3 children. Only one James Parberry paid taxes in either Barron or Hart counties in any one year. We never had two men of that name paying taxes in one year. In 1861, James enlisted in Glasgow in the 2nd Kentucky Cavalry. At age 37, he received a discharge in $299.25. He was captured in the Battle of Salineville, was paroled out of Richmond, Virginia, and he bought a bottle of whiskey in Rolling Fork, Mississippi in 1873. This is a summary of all the information that we have about when he was born so that we can make that decision about what his birth date was. The August 1850 census states his age is 26. That would have him born in 1823 or 24. The July 1860 census lists his age as 31, which would have him born in 1828 or 29. The February 1863 military discharge states his age is 37. That would have him born in 1825 or 26. And the June 1880 census gave his age as 52, or born in 1827-28. So you gather all the facts that you have from all of the different pieces of evidence, and you try to explain how there can be conflicts. The 1850 census, he probably did not provide that information. It was probably information that was given by the head of household, George Walton. The 1860 census, he may have provided that information, or his wife may have provided it. He may not have been available at the time the enumerator came for a visit. The February 1863 military discharge, I think that is the most reliable piece of information because he would have provided the information about his age at the time of his enlistment. And there really wasn't much incentive for him to fudge the information. So I'm inclined to think that he was born around 1825 or 1826. So let's wrap it up. We have James Wood Parberry, born about 1825-26 in Franklin County, Virginia. Both parents were born in Virginia, and he had migrated to Barron County, Kentucky by 1850. So then the next question we have is, who were James's parents? Well, we'll start with his father. That's going to be the straightforward one. Starting out with a search using wild cards for our P*B*RY with a residence specific to Franklin, Virginia. That's where we know that James was born in around 1825. And we have actually very few results. We have one result for 1830. That's the one that I want to start with because I will expect to find a child of around 5 years old in this household if it is the household of James Parberry. And here we have, in fact, if we look at the column headings, we have under 5 years of age. We have a child who fits the bill for our James, who was born 1825 or 1826. Looking at the 1840 census for this family, we find they've moved to Barron County, Kentucky. No surprise. That's where we found James Parberry in 1850. So he had migrated with his father before 1840. How do we know for sure that this William Parberry here is the William Parberry from Franklin County, Virginia? Let's line up the tick marks. Here's our entry for William from the 1830 census. The child, this would be James, lines up in 1830. He is under 5 years old. In 1840, he is 10 to 14. He has 2 older brothers that were 5 to 10 years old and are now 15 to 20 in 1840. The father lined up, he was 40 to 50 in 1830. He's now 50 to 60. The adult woman in the household had been 20 to 30 in 1840 and is now 30 to 40. And they have an adult female who had been 5 to 10 years old and is now in 1840, 15 to 20 years old. So this is an exact match from the household in Franklin County, Virginia, to the household in Barron County, Kentucky. Moving that family forward to 1850, we can see William Parberry now living in Macon, Missouri, and he has apparently become widowed because he is 61, but there is no female who would fit that category of 50 to 60-year-old. The interesting thing for us here, though, is that we see his children. Anne, Gustavus, and Henry were born in Virginia. Mary, Harrison, and Delana were born in Kentucky. And that shift between Virginia and Kentucky happened between the birth of Henry and the birth of Mary, which really lets us pin down that the family migrated from Virginia to Kentucky between 1832 and 1834. Next question is, can we find the marriage record? Well, we enter our Parberry with the wild cards, specifying a marriage in Franklin, Virginia between 1800 and 1824. And we have a marriage of a William Parberry, misindexed as Parberry, but notice this name, Delana Clay. Do you remember the name of the youngest child here? Delana, age 6. So that, again, gives us a link between this family in Missouri that we know is linked to this family in Barron and connects them to William Parberry in Franklin County. Now, I'm always disappointed when I don't see the camera icon because that suggests that I'm not going to be able to look at an actual document image. But don't take that for gospel anymore. When we open that record, we find the date of marriage, 17 March 1819 in Franklin County, and the film number is listed as 31,523. Let's find that film number in the catalog. We'll go up to search the catalog, we'll enter the film number, and it returns a couple of items. This second item is not of interest to us, it's too late. But this first one, 1786 to 1853, the marriage bond register and marriage bond licenses, That's covering our area that we were interested in, 1819. So clicking on that link and scrolling down, actually I took the easy route and just did a Control F and entered the 31523. It appears once. We have the magnifying glass, which indicates that it's indexed. We know that because we found this through the index. But notice here, it also has the camera icon, which means that these images have been digitized and are available online. But only if you're at a family history center. Now, there are other collections on that same page here. The marriage bond register and the loose marriage bonds actually has quite a lot of items, so I continued to scroll down and I found a section marriage bonds 1819 to 1823 that is not indexed, but the images have been digitized and are online. So I clicked that, and I realized that this collection is not going to be easy and straightforward. It's not just a book. There isn't an index at the front. So what I did was I examined a number of these loose papers and I identified how they were organized. I found that they are organized by year and then alphabetically within that year. So I zoomed out using these buttons here until I could fit as many of these little icons as possible on the screen. That way I could see where this year, 1819, ends. And it ends down here. So I want to estimate about where do I think the P's are going to be. And it's just basically a guess and check. And here we go. William Parberry and John Clay, held and firmly bound unto His Excellency James P. Preston. The condition of the above obligation relates to the marriage of William Parberry and Delana Clay. So we have identified both the parents, the birthplace, the approximate birth year of a wandering man for whom we began with very little information. We now know his full name, James Wood Parberry. He was born around 1825 or 26 in Franklin County, Virginia, to William Parberry and Delana Clay. He migrated to Barron County, Kentucky, probably between 1832 and 1834, married Nancy McMurray in 1851, and after serving in the Civil War and witnessing the fire at the Rolling Fork tragedy, he appears to have passed away between 1898 and 1900, probably in Grenville, Mississippi. So the next question that we're going to answer is going to be what happened to his wife Nancy and his children.